Daniela, an 8-year-old girl, used to leave her house every day without telling anyone where she was going. This continued until one day her father decided to follow her. He trailed her unnoticed, hiding behind trees and under the stench of withering plants to ensure his daughter did not spot him. When Daniela entered a dilapidated little house, her father, filled with fear, quietly followed her inside. The house was old and dirty, filled with laughter and crying. But what confused him the most were the strange sounds and voices that shook him to the core. He couldn't tell if they were from men or women, or if something was happening to his daughter, but all was about to be revealed. Omar had covered his face to avoid being recognized and slowly moved from room to room, looking for anything suspicious. When he reached the last room and slowly turned the doorknob, what he found left him speechless. You might wonder how he arrived at this point. Daniela had recently moved with her father to this new house and had no friends yet. She used to ride her bike and play alone. As weeks passed, Omar noticed his daughter was very bored, so he enrolled her in private classes to make good use of her time. Daniela would attend classes in the mornings, and in the afternoons, she rode her bike in the park every day at 8 a.m., with a ride picking her up at noon. Everything seemed fine. However, after a month and a half, Daniela began to leave the house without telling her father. Omar only realized this when he asked the maid, Beatrice, about his daughter's whereabouts. Beatrice simply replied, "Sir, you gave your daughter permission, that's why she went out to walk in the park. She always returns at 6:30 p.m., and it has been a week now." Surprised, Omar said, "She didn't take her bicycle." The maid informed him that wasn't the case and added, "Sir, let me tell you, things have been disappearing. I don't know what's happening." Anxious for his daughter's return, Omar waited to confront her about where she had been all this time. Dad replied that he now had new friends, which seemed very strange to him. He couldn't sleep all night, wondering why his daughter was coming home at that hour. The father called a cab and told them to pick up his daughter as usual, but he planned to go get her himself the next day. Omar picked up his daughter in a modern car, and the little girl, quite surprised, asked him, "Dad, what are you doing here?" He found his daughter acting a bit strange, telling her he just wanted to give her a surprise by picking her up. When they got home, he began to check her bag to see if there was anything unusual and found a note that read, "Meet me at our usual spot. Be careful if you are followed." The handwriting appeared to be that of an adult, which he found very odd. Daniela's mother had passed away giving birth to her, and since that moment, Omar had been both father and mother to the little girl. On Monday, Omar told his employee, "Let me know when my daughter leaves." Beatrice watched the girl doing her homework as usual until around 5 in the evening, when she heard the door being gently closed. Immediately, the employee called her boss, saying, Sir, your daughter just left with a suitcase and is heading towards the forest." Omar thanked her and, without his daughter noticing, began to follow her. Daniela walked quickly, and when she was very tired, she took a deep breath and looked around to see if anyone was following her. At that moment, Omar threw himself into the dry, smelly plants. Insects crawled over him, and at every corner, he hid behind a tree so his youngest daughter would not see him. Daniela arrived at an old, ugly, and terrifying house. The anxiety and uncertainty were taking over Omar, who was hiding and seeing his daughter knock on the door of that house. He kept asking himself, "What is my daughter doing here, oh God?" Daniela turned around one last time and Omar almost got caught. The old door of the house opened and the girl quickly entered, disappearing from her father's sight. Deeply distressed, Omar began to approach the house quietly, climbing those wooden stairs that made a creepy sound as he stepped on them. Caught up in the excitement of arriving at the house, Daniela forgot to close the door. Omar took advantage and, looking around, put on a face mask and the hood of his jacket to avoid being recognized. He reached the kitchen of that house and the interior was clean and tidy. It seemed as if someone had been living there. Omar's heart began to race, perhaps due to the mystery of what was inside the house and why his daughter was there. After searching room by room and hiding so no one would see him, he heard his daughter talking to a stranger. Nervousness took over the father, who would soon reach the room where he heard his daughter's voice. He saw that the little girl had left the room and was leaving the house. Upon reaching the door, he slowly turned the knob, and what he saw left him speechless. In front of him, on an old and dirty bed, was a sickly old man who could barely stand. When the old man saw him, he was greatly surprised, thinking it was the little girl Daniela who had returned. The sick old man and Omar stared at each other until Daniela's father, with a firm voice, told him that his daughter had been sneaking out all week from home and he never knew where she went until now that he followed her. He immediately demanded an explanation from the old man about who he was and what he was doing with his daughter. The old man couldn't stop crying, and after a great effort to compose himself, he told him that he lived in a nursing home where his children had forgotten him. They mistreated him and hardly ever came to visit him. The loneliness and sadness made him decide to escape with a little kitten he had. He had to live on the streets for several days until one day, little Daniela rode by on her bicycle. She saw the poor old man, shared what was left of her lunch with him, and also told the old man that near her house in the woods, there was an abandoned house where he could stay and sleep every afternoon. The little girl ingeniously finished off the pantry food and brought it to the poor old man and his cat so they could eat. Omar couldn't believe it and tears fell as he listened to everything the old man was saying, the heartbreaking story of the poor old man. He also realized that he was raising a kind-hearted and noble girl. Omar helped the old man to get up from that bed and told him to come live with him, where he would have a bed, hot water, and be well cared for the rest of his life. Do you have any thoughts after hearing this story? Tell us in the comments section. Next to give you another story, let's continue to see it. This baby wouldn't stop crying until her dad checked her diaper and rushed her to the hospital, his desperation growing. At 6 months old, his daughter's incessant crying alarmed him, but it was what he discovered under her diaper that opened his eyes in despair. He could have never imagined what was afflicting his daughter. That evening, the town was draped in a blanket of serenity, promising Juan, a 37-year-old man, a well-deserved rest after an exhausting day of work. The farm where he worked was steeped in constant tension, with everyone pushing themselves to the limit to meet increasingly challenging goals. The suffocating atmosphere made coming home the most anticipated moment of his day, when he opened the door to his home. The tranquility of the family environment enveloped him, momentarily dissipating the accumulated stress. Dona Rosa, the trusted nanny who looked after his little daughter Maria, only a few months old, was waiting to give him the day's report. "Good evening, Mr. Juan. The little one was an angel today. She slept very well and played a lot in her crib," said the nanny, adjusting her bag on her shoulder to leave. "Thank you for everything, Dona Rosa. I don't know what I'd do without you," Juan responded, accompanying her to the door. "See you tomorrow. Good night," said the woman with a gentle smile before leaving. Now alone, Juan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Being a single father was not in his plans, but the sudden death of his wife during childbirth had set him on this unexpected path. His wife Elena had a relatively smooth pregnancy, and both were excited about the arrival of their first child. Everything seemed to be going well until the day of delivery arrived. Elena was admitted to the hospital early in the morning, and the contractions began to intensify rapidly. Juan was by her side, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement while she endured the pain. However, as the labor progressed, complications arose. Elena showed signs of extreme exhaustion, and the doctors noticed the baby was in a complicated position, making delivery difficult. They decided to perform an emergency cesarean to ensure the safety of both Elena and the baby. Worried yet hopeful, Juan waited anxiously in the hallway as his wife was taken to the operating room. During the cesarean, unexpected problems arose. Elena began to lose a lot of blood. Despite the desperate efforts of the doctors to stop the bleeding, they couldn't control it. The situation quickly became critical. The doctors fought to save her life, but time was against them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a doctor came out, emerging from the operating room with a solemn expression. Juan listened with his heart in his throat to the words he never imagined he would hear. Elena had not survived the surgery. The news struck him like lightning, leaving him stunned and shattered amidst his grief. In the midst of his pain, Juan was introduced to his newborn daughter, Maria. Although his heart was broken by the loss of Elena, the sight of his daughter sparked a small glimmer of hope, giving him a reason to move forward despite the traumatic event. Juan dedicated himself tirelessly to work in order to provide everything his little girl could need. including the love and attention of Donna Rosa during the day. Exhausted, he would walk to the room where the little girl slept peacefully in her crib. The serene vision of his daughter brought him momentary relief to his tormented heart. He lay down on the bed, contemplating the stillness of his surroundings, allowing himself to relax for the first time that day. However, the peace was brief. It wasn't even 10 minutes before the baby began to cry. "Shoo, little one, what's wrong, my girl?" He tried to soothe his daughter. After managing to calm her down and finally getting her to sleep in his arms, Juan felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. He returned to bed, but soon the little one cried again. He spent the night awake, trying to get her to sleep, but it was in vain. This pattern of crying began to repeat every night just after Donna Rosa, the nanny, left. The woman always prepared everything with the utmost care before leaving Maria fed, with a clean diaper, and ready to sleep. Everything seemed perfect, but the serenity of the night was invariably broken by the baby's crying. One particular night, a sudden change marked the beginning of an even more challenging situation. Maria, who was always a quiet child, began to cry uncontrollably, much more desperately than other days. Juan noticed the intensity of the crying was unusual, something he couldn't understand or calm. "Oh, my girl, what's wrong?" he murmured with Maria in his arms, desperately trying to calm her. He walked around the room, showing her colorful toys in the hope of capturing her attention and stopping her cries. "Look what Daddy has for you," he said with a tone of desperation in his voice, as he swung a musical mobile over the crib. When the toys had no effect, Juan tried the bottle. Even though he knew the baby had been fed just before the nanny's departure, the child rejected the bottle, pushing it away with frantic gestures, and with the crying increasing in volume and desperation, Juan's thoughts swirled in anxiety and confusion. "Oh my God, she must be sick. I'll take her to the doctor," I was reflecting, feeling the weight of the responsibility of taking care of Maria without her mother nearby to share the worries and decisions. In a moment of desperation, I decided to call the nanny, hoping for some advice or explanation that Mrs. Rosa might have forgotten to mention. "Maria is crying a lot. Did something different happen today?" The nanny's response was as worried as it was inconclusive. "She cried a little before, but then she calmed down. I thought everything would be fine," she said with a voice full of concern and surprise. Juan's heart was racing frantically, with a mix of frustration and fear taking over him. He felt helpless, unable to comfort his daughter or to understand the reason for her incessant crying. The house, which was once a refuge of peace, now echoed with the sound of his baby's cry like a soundtrack to the growing anxiety of that poor distressed father. Every attempt to soothe his daughter seemed futile, and the night progressed with no signs of improvement. "I'm about to go insane," he thought, exhausted and in tears, sharing the desperation of his little baby. What began as simple challenging nights quickly turned into a deeply worrying enigma for Juan. Each frustrated attempt to calm Maria's crying only deepened the mystery, leaving him bewildered and anxious for a solution that seemed beyond his reach and comprehension. After endless hours in which all of Juan's attempts to calm his daughter's ceaseless crying only resulted in more tears and growing distress, a profound feeling of helplessness enveloped him, plunging him into a sensation of desperation and frustration as he struggled to find a solution to his baby's suffering, not knowing what else to do to relieve her pain. Every sob from Maria was a stab of pain that pierced Juan's heart, intensifying the fear that something serious had happened. With all his anxiety driven by a paternal instinct that screamed that something was not right, Juan decided to check once more if there was anything physically different with his daughter. With hands trembling from anxiety and fear, he delicately held his baby, whose incessant crying now gave way to suffocating and painful moans. Each sound was an echo of suffering that hurt his heart. As he carefully removed the diaper from the little girl, hoping to discover the cause of the crying and so much discomfort, he found an alarming sight that left him perplexed. Hidden until then by the innocent protection of the diaper, a scene that defied his understanding and caused his worst fear. "What on earth is this?" he said, astonished. "Oh my God, what is this on the delicate skin of Maria near her groin?" There was a strange swelling, something that one had never seen before. Juan's vision blurred as he spotted something dark and small, akin to a tiny ball, which made his body freeze. Leaning in for a closer look, his heart pounded rapidly. each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. With the utmost care he could muster, he gently touched the swollen area, and Maria's immediate reaction was a sharp cry of pain, so piercing and desperate that it seemed to slice through the soul of the sturdy man. The horror of the situation struck him like lightning. This was no minor discomfort. It was something causing intense pain to his little girl. Immediately, Juan grabbed the phone, his hands shaking so much he could barely hit the keys to dial emergency services. Overwhelmed by frantic urgency, he stuttered on the phone. "My daughter, please, help us," Juan said, his voice heavy with emotion and panic. His words barely came out, choked by the lump in his throat and the tears threatening to spill. He could feel his heart beating uncontrollably in his chest, each throb a reminder of the desperation engulfing him. Holding Maria carefully, he looked at the doctors with pleading eyes, begging for a solution, for anything that could ease his daughter's suffering. Every second of waiting for a response felt like an eternity, with the child crying in his arms, each cry a reminder of her vulnerability and Juan's duty to protect her. When he finally managed to communicate the urgency, the instructions sounded distant, drowned out by the sound of his own heart pounding uncontrollably. Without wasting another second, Juan hurried to get ready. He dressed quickly, swapping the comfort of his pajamas for clothes suitable for rushing out at night. Still trembling, he took Maria in his arms with all the care in the world and ran to the car. His desperation gave him a strength and agility he didn't know he had. The drive to the hospital was a blur of lights and shadows, with his mind consumed by worry. Juan barely noticed the route, as every thought was focused on the girl, that strange swelling, the tiny dark ball, and the unbearable pain she had felt. "Please let everything be okay," he prayed silently, a desperate plea for his daughter not to suffer any more. Upon arriving at the hospital, Juan ran with a speed he had never possessed before, holding Maria tightly against his chest. Every step he took was driven by desperate love and tireless determination. A father's heartbeat echoing the profound commitment to protect his daughter at all costs, overcoming any obstacle in his way. After entering the emergency room and being attended to, Juan's attention remained solely on Maria. As doctors meticulously examined the baby, one approached with a look that Juan instantly read as worrisome. He braced himself for the news he somewhat expected. "This is serious, gentlemen. There is a large tick," the doctor announced, pointing at the swelling on Maria's skin. "Ticks are external parasites that cling to the skin and feed on the host's blood. This particular one seems to have been feeding for a while, causing the swelling and the pain your daughter is experiencing. Fortunately, we've caught it in time and can safely remove it," the doctor explained calmly. He continued, emphasizing that the removal must be handled carefully to avoid leaving the tick's head embedded in the skin, which could lead to an infection. "After removal, we'll clean the affected area and apply an antibiotic treatment to prevent any potential infection. It's also crucial to monitor Maria in the coming days for any signs of illness, as ticks can transmit diseases like Rocky Mountain spotted fever or Lyme disease, although rare in this region," he added. As the doctor spoke, Juan listened intently, trying to absorb all the information. He was shocked by the idea of a tick living on his daughter's skin. It was horrifying. The doctors then explained that Maria must have come into contact with something or someone carrying the tick. Confused and alarmed, Juan interjected, "But my daughter stays home all day with the nanny, and we don't have pets. Who could she have contacted?" "Yes, sir, the tick came from somewhere," the doctors responded, clarifying that the presence of the parasite was not random. Ticks don't just appear out of nowhere. They are usually carried by animals, people, or objects that have been in contact with infested areas. This parasite must have come into your home in some specific way. One of the doctors took a moment to detail further. Ticks cling to their hosts and feed on their blood and can be found in areas with dense vegetation such as parks, gardens, and rural zones. They can also be transported by domestic animals like dogs and cats if these animals have access to such areas and then come into contact with your daughter or her surroundings. Driven by indignation, Juan decided to call Dona Rosa, the nanny. Despite the late hour, she answered the phone soon after, her voice revealing surprise at the urgency in her employer's tone. "How is it possible that Maria has a tick, Dona Rosa? Can you explain this to me?" Juan demanded. A trembling voice, mixed with anger and concern, explained that there had been contact with an animal, but she was puzzled because they stayed inside all day. How could this have happened? Mr. One was genuinely unaware that the neighbor's dog might have ticks, and he would never knowingly put Maria at risk. Mrs. Rosa apologized with a voice filled with worry. Even though Juan was furious about the situation, he knew he had to stay calm for his baby's sake. Let's talk about this tomorrow, Mrs. Rosa. Right now, I need to take care of my daughter, he concluded before hanging up the phone, leaving the babysitter with her thoughts and the weight of her mistake. That night at the hospital, while Juan's daughter received the necessary treatment, he watched every action of the doctors attentively. The removal of the tick was a meticulous process, and the doctors acted with utmost caution to ensure that Maria felt no more discomfort than strictly necessary, with his heart tight but grateful for the professionalism and care of the medical staff. Juan was reassured, "Your daughter will be fine, it's just a tick, but you need to be more careful," one of the doctors said, offering Juan a reassuring look. After the safe removal of the parasite and treatment of the bite, Maria's crying subsided, giving way to a soft and tranquil breathing. Juan felt a wave of relief wash over him, although he still felt a bit indignant about the situation. The doctors provided clear instructions on preventing future tick infestations. Emphasizing the importance of keeping the indoor environment clean and free from potential hosts for these parasites, they advised regularly checking toys and items brought from outside and considering preventive measures around the home. Absorbing every word, the lawyer was determined to follow the recommendations to protect his daughter, Maria. The next morning, the atmosphere was heavy with the tension of the previous night's events. When Mrs. Rosa arrived, she found Juan still shaken but firm in his stance. The conversation that followed was charged with emotion. Still processing the night's events, the father couldn't contain his frustration. "Mrs. Rosa, how could something like this happen? You know how important Maria is to me," Juan began, his voice trembling with anger and concern. "I entrust my daughter to you every day, believing she is in the best hands. You are like a second mother to her. How is it possible that something like this happened under your care? Maria is all I have left after Elena, and I can't allow anything to happen to her. I need you to understand the seriousness of this. The house always had a tick problem. One had always been so careful, so attentive to every detail. What happened this time? I feel betrayed and deeply concerned," the visibly shaken nanny tried to explain. "Mr. Juan, I swear I didn't know. I never imagined that the neighbor's dog could bring ticks into the house. I've always taken the utmost care with Maria. I love her as if she were my own granddaughter. I deeply regret what has happened and I take full responsibility. Please believe me, I would never intentionally put Maria at risk. This will not happen again. I will do everything in my power to ensure that the house is clean and safe for her." Juan looked at her, trying to calm his fury and concern. He knew that Dona Rosa had been a great help and support since Elena's death and that she really cared for Maria. However, the severity of the incident could not be ignored. "Dona Rosa, I appreciate your apologies and I know you didn't do it on purpose, but we need to be more careful from now on. I don't want to see any animals near the house. We have to ensure a safe environment for Maria. I hope you understand the gravity of this situation and the measures we must take to prevent something like this in the future." The nanny nodded, her eyes filled with tears, understanding the seriousness of the matter and the need to redouble her efforts to protect little Maria. The silence that followed was dense as Juan pondered what to do. Despite his initial anger, he recognized the sincerity in the woman's apology, who had been so helpful, and her importance in his daughter's life. "I don't want any more dogs in the house." "Agreed. We have to ensure a safe environment for her," he said finally. Establishing a clear new rule, the decision to not allow more animals in the house meant the end of Dona Rosa's extra income, something Juan knew would deeply affect her. However, valuing the decision and the affection she always showed for his baby, he proposed to triple the nanny's salary as a fair way to compensate for the loss and reinforce his trust in Dona Rosa. Although relieved to keep her job, she was visibly moved and grateful for Juan's generosity. "Thank you, Mr. Juan. I will do everything possible to ensure that this never happens again. Maria is like a granddaughter to me," she said seriously, as the man nodded, feeling that they had reached a mutual understanding. Over time, the relationship between Juan and Dona Rosa grew even stronger. both committed to providing a safe and loving environment for Maria, ensuring that she never had to face such a terrifying situation again. With a voice trembling with relief and gratitude, Dona Rosa expressed her thankfulness to Mr. Juan. "You don't know how much this means to me. I was so worried that I might lose my job and your trust, which you've placed in me all this time. I promise to do everything I can to make sure nothing like this happens again. Maria is like a granddaughter to me. I would never want anything bad to happen to her. Thank you for your understanding and for giving me another chance. Your generosity deeply moves me, and I am eternally grateful." That moment marked not only the end of a terrifying incident but also the strengthening of a mutual trust and commitment to ensure Maria's well-being above all else. After the distressing incident with the tick, Juan's life gradually returned to normal, though now marked by heightened vigilance and care. The house, once a place of unexpected incidents, became a sanctuary of safety and love. Every corner was inspected and kept free of threats. Maria, the elderly lady, doubled her efforts. Following all the new guidelines set by Juan, her commitment and dedication, unquestionable even before the incident, became even more apparent, increasing the trust Juan had in her to care for his daughter. The restored harmony in the house allowed Juan to focus on his work routine with a somewhat calmer mind, knowing his daughter was in safe hands. The baby, after proper treatment, fully recovered from the ordeal. And though it was a large tick, a dangerous parasite, she was well. Her bright smile and contagious laughter were constant reminders of what mattered most in Juan's life. "Pass me little Rosa to hold," Juan would say upon arriving home, having made a consistent effort to be more present in Maria's life. The moments they spent together, whether playing on the living room floor, reading stories before bed, or exploring the small garden at the back of the house, became the highlights of his days. These precious moments, filled with discovery and joy, strengthened the bond between father and daughter, building a love and mutual trust that deepened as Maria grew, exploring the world with eyes full of joy. Juan accompanied every step, every laugh, every new discovery with a heart brimming with love and an unwavering commitment to offer her the best of the world. The dark story of the tick had become a thing of the past. Juan and Maria's home was now a refuge of peace and happiness, resonating with laughter and joy. The days of anguish of the little one transformed into distant memories, and every corner of their home was filled with love and joy. Juan, grateful for his daughter's health and happiness, looked to the future with hope, determined to continue protecting and loving her with all his being. The difficult moments had strengthened their relationship and his determination to be the best father possible for Maria. Every day, Juan devoted time to playing with Maria, reading stories, exploring the garden, and enjoying every little adventure together. Maria's smile and her contagious laughter were the light that illuminated their lives, reminding Juan how fortunate he was to have his daughter. Although the shadow of the past was still present in his memories, the love and happiness they shared filled their home with a warmth that nothing could break. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the above two stories? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comment section. That's all for today's story. Please subscribe and give a thumb up. See you next time.